The restaurant was quiet that evening, except for the soft murmur of conversations and the faint hum of jazz floating through the air. Daniel sat by the window, nervously adjusting his sleeves, his reflection staring back at him from the glass. He wasn't sure why he'd agreed to this blind date. Maybe it was loneliness. Maybe it was the way his sister kept reminding him that life doesn't wait forever. Or maybe, deep down, he just wanted to feel human again. Wanted to believe that love could exist even after everything he'd lost. He kept glancing at the door, heart pounding every time it opened, hoping and fearing that she'd walk in. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the beauty of unexpected love, please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us spread more stories that remind the world love still exists. When she finally arrived, Daniel almost didn't recognize her. She wasn't what he'd expected. Not glamorous or overly dressed, not with the polished confidence he thought most blind dates carried. Instead, she looked real. Soft brown hair tied in a loose bun, a simple blue dress, eyes that carried both hope and exhaustion. She introduced herself quietly. "I'm Lily." Her voice barely above a whisper. But before Daniel could respond, a small hand slipped into hers. And that's when he saw the boy. He couldn't have been more than 6, with messy blonde hair and big, curious eyes that scanned the room like it was a playground. Lily looked embarrassed, apologizing softly as she explained, "I couldn't find a sitter tonight." Daniel smiled awkwardly, not sure what to say. He wasn't prepared for this. A date with a single mom. It wasn't part of the plan. He'd imagined candlelight, conversation, maybe even laughter. Not a third little chair pulled up to the table by a child who was now fiddling with the cutlery like it was treasure. As the evening began, silence filled the space between them like fog. Daniel asked polite questions about her job, where she lived, but Lily's answers were short, careful. He could tell she'd been hurt before, guarded like someone who had learned not to expect too much from people. Her eyes drifted now and then to her son, who sat quietly drawing something on a napkin. Daniel tried to read her, tried to find something to hold on to, but all he could see was distance. And for a moment, he wondered if he'd made a mistake coming here. Then, out of nowhere, the boy looked up, his innocent voice cutting through the still air. "Are you my new dad?" The entire restaurant seemed to freeze. Lily's face turned pale, her hands trembling slightly as she reached for her son's arm. "Ethan," she whispered, "that's not... We're just having dinner." But the boy looked confused. "But Mom, you said maybe today we'll meet someone nice." Daniel didn't know what to say. For a second, he just sat there, caught between shock and something deeper. Something that tugged at his heart in a way he hadn't felt in years. He looked at Lily, who was blinking back tears, mortified, apologizing again and again. But instead of being angry or uncomfortable, Daniel just smiled gently and leaned toward the boy. "Well, Ethan," he said softly, "I don't know about that yet. But I can be your friend." That simple sentence changed everything. The tension that had filled the table began to fade, replaced by the kind of warmth that words couldn't quite describe. Ethan giggled, proudly showing Daniel his napkin drawing. A stick figure family holding hands under a sun. Lily watched, her eyes glistening. For the first time that evening, Daniel saw her smile. Really smile. And it was the kind of smile that carried both sadness and strength. As dinner went on, conversation flowed more naturally. Lily told him she worked part-time at a bookstore, and Daniel shared that he was an architect. They talked about small things, coffee, music, the weather, but somehow it all felt important. Every word, every glance, every laugh carried weight. Ethan interrupted now and then with stories about his school, his lost toy car, his favorite superhero. Daniel listened, really listened, and Lily noticed that. She noticed how he looked at her son, not as a burden, but as a little person with a heart. When the meal ended, it was raining outside. Daniel insisted on walking them to their car. Lily tried to protest, but he smiled and opened his umbrella anyway. The three of them walked under it, huddled close, the rain tapping gently above them. Ethan held both their hands, and for that brief walk, it felt like a family. As they reached her car, Lily turned to thank him. But before she could speak, Daniel said quietly, "You're doing an incredible job, Lily. He's lucky to have you." Her eyes softened. Those words, simple as they were, seemed to break something inside her, something she'd been holding together for far too long. She nodded, unable to speak, and when she finally drove away, Daniel stood there in the rain, his heart strangely heavy. He didn't know what it was. Hope, regret, or something in between. The next day, he couldn't stop thinking about her. Weeks passed. Life went on, as it always does. But every time Daniel drove past the small bookstore on Main Street, he thought of her. One afternoon, he finally stopped by. The bell above the door jingled softly as he stepped inside, and there she was, arranging books on a shelf, hair falling loosely across her face. When she looked up and saw him, surprise flickered across her features, then a shy smile. "Daniel," she said softly, almost like she didn't believe it was really him. He shrugged, smiling. "Thought I'd finally buy that book you recommended." From that day, he began visiting often. Sometimes he'd stay for hours, helping her sort books, talking about life, listening to Ethan's endless stories when the boy was there after school. Slowly, gently, without either of them planning it, their lives began to intertwine. Daniel learned that Lily had been abandoned by her husband when Ethan was 2, left with nothing but bills and broken promises. She'd fought her way through every hardship, working double shifts, sacrificing sleep and dreams just to make sure her son never felt unloved. Daniel admired her strength. He too carried his own ghosts, a fiancée he'd lost in a car accident years ago. He'd shut himself off from love since then, convinced he wasn't meant to have a family anymore. But being around Lily and Ethan changed that. It made him believe that maybe love doesn't always come wrapped in perfection. Sometimes it shows up broken, in the form of two people who just need to heal together. Months went by. Their bond deepened quietly. Daniel began picking Ethan up from school, helping him with homework, teaching him how to draw buildings and bridges. He'd never imagined himself playing catch in a park again, or hearing a child laugh as he chased him through falling leaves. But now he couldn't imagine life without it. Lily noticed how happy her son was, how safe he seemed around Daniel, and that filled her heart with both gratitude and fear. Because love, after all, can be terrifying, especially when you've lost before. One evening, after closing the bookstore, they walked by the lake. The sun was dipping low, casting golden ripples across the water. Ethan ran ahead, laughing, skipping stones. Lily and Daniel walked behind him, silent. She finally spoke, her voice trembling slightly. "Daniel, I'm scared. You've been so good to us, but I don't know if I can handle losing someone again." Daniel looked at her, his expression tender but firm. "You won't lose me, Lily. I don't run from people who make life worth living." Tears filled her eyes, and before she could speak, Ethan came running back, holding Daniel's hand and saying softly, "Mom, I think he's the one." Both adults laughed, but there was truth in the boy's innocence. Because sometimes children see what adults are too afraid to believe. That night, as Daniel tucked Ethan into bed for the first time during one of their movie nights, the boy whispered, "You're the best, Daniel. You make Mom smile again." It was then Daniel realized he wasn't just falling in love with Lily. He was falling in love with the idea of being a father, of belonging somewhere again. The months turned into a year. Christmas came. They decorated a small tree together, hung handmade ornaments, and baked cookies that burned a little at the edges but were perfect anyway. And when midnight struck, Ethan handed Daniel a small wrapped gift. Inside was a child's drawing. 3 stick figures again, holding hands under a bright yellow sun. But this time, the drawing had names written beneath them. Mom, me, and Dad. Daniel's eyes welled up. He looked at Lily, who was standing near the window, watching quietly. She didn't say anything, but the tears in her eyes said enough. Love had come quietly, unexpectedly, without grand gestures or promises. It had come through small moments, through a boy's innocent question, a woman's resilience, and a man's decision to open his heart again. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us share stories of hope, love, and second chances with the world. And before you go, we'd love to hear from you. Comment below. Do you believe love can begin in the most unexpected places? Because sometimes, all it takes is one brave moment, one innocent question, and the courage to say yes to a second chance.